With no further ado, I'm going to introduce our main speaker. That would be Jay from Moscow, Idaho. So everybody welcome Jay.
All right, I made it up here without tripping. We're on a roll. I'm Jay, I'm alcoholic. Can you hear me in the half measure section? All right. I got inventory row right here. It's a bunch of friends of mine, so they'll give me the critique afterward. My sobriety date's September 7th, 1984. So thank God for AA, and yes, I've been sober longer than some of you have been alive. My home group is the Bring Your Own Book meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous on Wednesday nights in Moscow, Idaho. If you're in Moscow, it's Moscow. Anywhere else in the world, it's Moscow. It's how we keep the Turons separated from us. So I am old, not just in sobriety, but in age, and my memory is going a little bit. I'm finding that I have to search for words once in a while. This is no joke, so you might see me pause. It usually doesn't affect me. I don't think it'll matter tonight because it usually comes up if I'm speaking to a large group or something. So I want to thank the committee, seriously. I was involved with the Flagstaff Roundup for years. I lived here from 89 to 99. By the way, I got sober at the Valley Alano Club in Scottsdale. So lived in Phoenix for 22 years growing up, Camelback High. So I just want to thank the committee because I've been on committees. I've been on a lot of committees. And if you haven't been, it's a lot of work. It's a cliche, but you can't imagine some of the details and everything that have to be dealt with. So I think maybe on three, can we just give them a big thank you? Like 1, 2, 3. Thank you. I want to thank JR for asking me to speak. In Moscow, there's only one speaker meeting a month, and I get the speakers, and we try to get speakers from out of town a lot so that we don't double up. So I have only spoken once in the last 10 years, and maybe twice in the last 12. And so this is going to be disjointed. For the first time, I actually brought note cards because I don't want to walk off there and say, oh, I didn't talk about this, or I didn't, and I apologize. I don't know if I like note cards. I've never done it, but JR said he wanted me to be funny. I'm going to assume you're going to be laughing at me, not with me, but it should be funny. If the marathon meetings are going on, you might want to go there. It might be better. My goal is not to tell you my story tonight. You'll hear plenty of it, but this isn't my chance to tell you my story in my mind. It's for me to try to talk about what it was like. I was always taught we talk about what it was like specifically so the newcomer can go, wow, I'm like that. Maybe this will work for me. I want to talk about, how I drank, how I thought. My first meeting, I didn't even know that Alcoholics Anonymous was about not abstaining completely. I honestly thought it taught you how to control your drinking. And I didn't know if I was an alcoholic. I honestly thought I was just getting crazy. And the person who spoke, it was a speaker meeting, and the person who spoke talked about how they drank and how they felt. And at my very first meeting, I went, oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. And it was a great step up from being crazy. And I had hope because I thought, I'm done. I don't get it anymore. I thought I did, but I didn't. So, by the way, I heard some PA people here. So I was the chairperson I was the spiritual chairperson for the 46th annual Icky PA. So I'm going to go icky, icky, icky. Thank you. So I'll talk about young people. They've been it's been a main part of my sobriety, and I love young people in AA. And I'm a crier. I worked in the bar business for 20 years. If you cried once in the bar, you talk about the speed of light. anything that's negative about you when you work in the bar business goes around that bar faster than the speed of light. So you never, ever cry. You never show any weakness. You're just hip, slick, and cool. Because otherwise it's, did you hear about Jay? And you don't want that. Now, this is true. My wife's right here in front of me. I cry at Alka-Seltzer commercials. He's got a stomach ache, but he's gonna be okay, all right? You know, I watch a movie, the girl's lost her dog, and she's sad, and I'm like, I'm sad with her. And then she finds the dog, and I'm happy for her. So I'm gonna cry, go get a cup of coffee, you know, whatever. But it's more comfortable for me if I let you know right up front that it's gonna happen. Background, you know, my family, growing up in my family, by the way, if you ever have to, I was a nightclub DJ, so if you ever have to use a mic, you can be this close to the mic and whisper and they can hear you. But if you're back here, nothing. So when you want to use the mic, we used to talk about just touch it with your lips. You're at the right. So, you know, if you're going to be up here tomorrow or something reading and stuff, that's the key, is just get close. Background was, drinking was normal in my family. My dad was more the drinker, but my mom drank just to hang out, you know, that kind of stuff. It's just normal. A lot of drinking. I didn't actually start drinking till I was 19, but for instance, my dad would have poker parties, and at 6, 7 years old, he had taught me how to mix the drinks for all the different players. So 7 and 7 and scotch and water. You know, it was just part of life. Never thought about drinking. It was just how it was. I was a straight A student in school, basically. Ended up finding out that I got my self-worth from being a straight A student. I was nicknamed Brains in school. You know, hey Brains, how do you do this? I ended up, not a joke, ended up teaching my 8th grade algebra class because the teacher didn't know. She would just say, well, Jay, just come up and you do that, you know. So that was my identity. And it took me a long time in AA to get an actual self-worth or self-identity, because it became later in life, it came about, here's the car that I just bought, do you like it? Here's the house I have, do you like that? Here's, you know, I used to tell jokes in the bar, and so do you like me? Do you like this stuff? Because if you like this stuff, then that means you like me. You see what I mean? And it took me so long to realize what self-esteem for me meant is, if you want self-esteem, you have to do esteemable acts. And so my growing up, it was just all about identity, and I didn't have one. Even in the bar business, I would meet somebody, and I was the nightclub DJ, right? And I'd meet somebody, and maybe to go to lunch the next day on a date. Half a dozen times, maybe a dozen, this would happen. I'd be halfway through lunch and put down the fork. You're nothing like I thought you were like. And I'd be like, oh, well, sure, I can be, you know. And I'd have to put on this act. I would have to be a chameleon for everybody, because it was so important for them. If they liked me, then I like me. And it took me 10, 15 years into sobriety to start learning how I could like me. It doesn't mean I'm the greatest thing or anything, but I had to start liking me so that I didn't have to depend on other people, if that makes sense. I want to talk about, I want to talk about the drinking, but I want to talk about what happened, and I also want to talk a lot about sobriety. 38 years of sobriety is over half my life, and I like to talk about some of the pitfalls I fell into so newcomers don't have to. I want to talk about the steps for the same reason, so I'm going to try and get to that quickly. So, got my first relationship I started dating a week before high school got out, because my mom especially was like, you are so smart, you need to focus on grades so you can get a scholarship, and no dating till you're out of high school. And you don't know the difference, right? That's all you know. So it's like, okay. So my first date was a couple weeks before high school ended, and gotta slow down a little bit, Jay. You know, breathe. we dated for close to 2 years, and I mean, we were, in my mind, and hers, I thought, we were going to get married, have 2.3 kids. She was going to drive the white Blazer. I was going to drive the Corvette. You know, I mean, it was... And virtually every relationship I had after that, I could be in the DJ booth and see a young lady and go, oh, she's the one. We're going to be married, you know. And we broke up. Her parents kind of had to break us up because they wanted her to focus on school, and she had a scholarship from her dad's company. And I was devastated because, I mean, my parents, everybody had always told me, you're so smart, you can have anything you want, anything. Just do the right things, you could have anything. And it's like, okay, well, I want her, right? And I'm not joking. I mean, it was just right there in front of me. This is my, you know, it's my life, and she's gone. And for the next 6 weeks, I did nothing but cry to my friends, not literally, because you can't cry, but they finally said, look, dude, you know, you got to get over this. Let's go out drinking. And I'd never done that. So we went to a bar. When I first tasted alcohol, unlike many people, I didn't like the effect because I was kind of a jock too. I played baseball and I didn't like to be out of control, but I loved telling jokes, having fun, kind of made me relax a little bit. And so I wanted to keep doing that. And so I had to learn how to be a good drinker, and it didn't take me long because I'm kind of an overachiever so that you'll like me. And so I started drinking, and it just got better and better. It was new clubs, new drinks, new jokes, you know, it was fun. I hadn't had fun. I really hadn't had fun my whole life because I was doing nothing but studying. Gonna breathe now. I get on a roll. So the first 3 or 4 years of that, there wasn't any problems with drinking. Just had fun. I'd started DJing, so I became a nightclub DJ part-time. I had a day job. Gosh, I didn't think I'd be nervous, and all of a sudden it just hits you, you know.
You were good.
Yeah, I'm awesomely mediocre. So, did I mention JR told me I had to be funny because I'm the Saturday night speaker? So I got a job DJing, and I was pretty good at that, and I ended up working in some of the bigger nightclubs in Phoenix. Those of you from Phoenix might remember for a while when St. Mary's shut down the AA dances. We had the AA dances at Malarkey's in Phoenix on 18th Street and Indianola, the biggest nightclub in Arizona at the time. Ruth W. was our first speaker. Black Wally was our second speaker, and please don't take that wrong. Black Wally and I were good acquaintances. He explained to me because I asked him, you know, isn't that a little stranger named Black Wally? Because he happened to be black. And he said, no, Jay, because when I came in 48, there was like Tall Wally, Plumber Wally, Roofer Wally, and you know, so they just said, well, talk to Black Wally. And he goes, doesn't bother me, so I just want you to know that. So I got good at DJing, and I ended up making that kind of a full-time, well, I'll get into that. So I did a lot of DJing, and back then, to get dance music played, so if the record companies could make money and the artists could make money, the only way they could play it was in nightclubs. There were no dance music stations, none. This is like late 70s. So they would take the 16 biggest markets in the US, Phoenix was one, take the 5 roughly biggest nightclub jocks, make them billboard reporters, and you'd send in a playlist every week. Well, if your playlist had a particular song at number 1, and 2 other jocks had it at number 1, and you were first in the nation to be number 1, and it went number 1 on the dance music chart, and it went top 50 in the Billboard Hot 100, and it sold 500,000 copies, you got a gold record. So I actually was the first in the nation to play Prince's first gold record, I Want to Be Your Lover. Rick James' first gold record, You and I. Prince's first gold records, which were Everybody Dance, 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 Yowza, 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 La Freak, remember? Ah, Freak Out. Good Times. Anyway, I ended up with we had all the gold records down at what was called the record pool office, and I guess after I moved to Flagstaff, one of the office managers got mad, took them all, stuck them in his trunk, and left town. So the gold records are all gone. But I think I had somewhere between 8 and 12 for being the first in the nation. So I was good at that. To give you an idea, so I was drinking a lot, but I didn't think it was a lot. It wasn't a lot yet. It was just often. We would party it. Well, all I did is party. I love the bar business. I loved it. One thing I hear from a lot, I have pet peeves. I'll tell you a couple. So one is, I don't like people getting to the podium and say, we all drank for effect, none of us love the taste. Okay, well, I'm the only alcoholic in the universe that loved the taste, okay? I don't like saying stuff that we all, because I don't know that's true. So I love the taste of drinking. Michelob, Grand Marnier were my favorites, along with margaritas, but, whatever. And so I went along drinking, partying. To give you an idea, though, I'm not a professional drunk. One of my favorite stories. Oh, and by the way, one of my best friends that is sitting in the front row, sorry that I don't cry, he's the only one, probably in the whole crowd, that worked with me in the bar business, so he's seen me before AA for 5 years. So it's great to reconnect because he lives in Payson now. So I had a girlfriend at one, I've had different girlfriends during that period. I had been dating one for about 1.5 years, and I started to think maybe she was cheating on me. And I hope she was, because I was already becoming a wreck. But so I would get home at 3 a.m, and I was lonely, And now you have to understand, many of you are young. 35 years ago, no, this would be 40 years ago, there were no cell phones. And so it was just landlines, if you even know what that is. And if you called somebody and they were on the phone, you got a busy signal. So if you called them back again and they were still on the phone, you still got a busy signal. If somebody accidentally took the phone and forgot to put it back on the hook, it just would sit there and you could call for hours and it'd be busy, right? So it's 3 a.m, and I decide, I'm gonna, just see, maybe she's up, and, it's only 3 a.m. And so I called, and it was busy. I'm like, all right, what's going on? So on phones back then, you could hit redial. So I called her number, and I hit redial, and I'm drunk, so I sit there for about 15 minutes just hitting redial, and it's busy. And I'm like, she's got somebody there, and she took the phone off the hook. So I'm in Ahwatukee, and I drive to Glendale, which is not right around the corner, and I knock on the door. Now it's about 4 a.m, and pound on the door, and she comes to the door, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I'm like looking behind her, And I said, "Well, I was calling you, and your line was busy, so I thought, maybe there was a problem, or you'd left it off the hook." I'm really drunk, okay? And so she goes, "My phone is not off the hook. What number were you calling?" I said, 555-4444, whatever. She goes, "That's your number." So I am not a hero drinker, great, that's, as I said, at best I'm awesomely mediocre. Okay, things started happening. So we broke up soon after that. So I was dating a different person, and this is when it started happening. And I'd been dating her for about 6 weeks, and of course we were going to get married and have 2.3, in my mind, we'd only been dating for 6 weeks, I'd never mentioned that to her, but we're driving along one night, I picked her up, and she looks at me and she goes, "Have you been drinking?" I said, "Yeah, She goes, "You're drunk, and you're driving." And this is what I thought. I thought, we're done. Because this is not drunk, and you need to drink like me if I'm going to continue. I didn't say any of this, but this is serious. I mean, this is a tell, is that I started dumping people out of my life because they didn't approve of my drinking. A coworker of mine had a wife who it turned out was in Al-Anon. I'll just say, Little Sisters of Perpetual Revenge. You can all come up and get mad at me. And she came into where I worked, and I was his boss. And she came in one day, and they were family friends too. But she goes, "Are you hungover again?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "You're an alcoholic. You need to get help." Right in front of a couple of my coworkers. And I was like, "Oh my God, I feel so bad for your husband that he has to live with you." So I had no clue about dating. I was constantly trying to figure out. There was a gentleman who worked with us we worked at a bar that was modeled after Cheers. There was actually a writer from Phoenix for Cheers, and they had the overhead glass racks. We had a customer that came in all the time named Norm Party Pedersen, and when he came in, we would go, "Norm!" And we had a bartender who drove a Corvette who. This was the truth. You did not bring a date into that bar because the date was going to go, "Who's that?" Just like whatever the bartender was at Cheers, I can't remember his name. So, yeah, so just yell out because the words are not going to come to me. Sam, thank you. And so I had no clue about dating, and I would actually try to just kind of sit a chair down from Jim to hear what his lines were because I didn't know what to say. I just had no idea what to say to women, and I was actually very shy back then, not so much now, but I was very shy. And what I found about drinking is for some people it's 4 beers, but for me it was 5 to 8. I got numb enough to have some courage and talk to ladies. But about 8 or 9, I started to get a little bit slurry. And so I didn't want to have them go, "Wow, he's kind of starting to slur his words." So I was okay. Between 5 and 8, I could talk to you. About 9, I'd be like, "Well, it's really good talking to you. I hope I see you tomorrow night." And so I'm sure they were going, it's like, "Wow, now he's gone. Now he's here. Now he's gone." And I couldn't date. I mean, the only way it was is if she was drunk and I was drunk and we'd just start, and away we'd go. But it got very frustrating because I was starting to get lonely, and then I started getting negative. And one of the jokes or ways I look at it was, this is the truth. I would, if I had won $100 million lottery back then, God would have made sure there was another winner. Because the rest of my life, I would have been bitching that I only got half that lottery. It was just negative. Somebody said, "Hey, we're going to try tequila night on Tuesday night." If all they had to say is, "We're going to try tequila night," and I'd go, "That's stupid. That's dumb." It was just more negative. And so I started... when I got to AA, I found out about what people call the allergy and the obsession. There was a gentleman that lived here for years. I don't know if he still does. That was his mantra, the allergy and the obsession. And the allergy for me was, I just wanted one more. I did not go to the bar to have 15 or 20 drinks. I went to have a few, 4, 5, And I'd have 5, and it'd be like, I got to get up tomorrow, but I'm just going to have one more. And well, what's the difference between 6 and 7, And then she might walk in, whoever the new wife was going to be. And I'd go, "Well, I got to have a couple beers to see if she's with people." And then Billy'd buy me one, so I got to buy him one back. Now I'm up to 11. It's like, well, I was going to leave at 10. Now it's 11. Might as well have one more. Now I got 12. And I'd be sitting there having 15 or 20. And I weighed 160 pounds, so it was a lot. And the next day I'd go, "Okay, you can't do this anymore," because I was going into work with a hangover every day. And I started, so for a while I tried, okay, I'm just going to have a soda in between each drink. That way I can only have half as many, right? So it was like, okay, drink and then soda, and then drink and then soda. And I just ended up having to pee a lot. And so then they came out with LA beer, right? So that was half the alcohol. I'm like, perfect. I can have this and I can just have normal amount and it's only half the alcohol. Well, I just had twice the amount and I just had to pee a lot. So then it was try going in later, try leaving earlier, which never happened. I was kind of trying to control my drinking and it wasn't working real well. So, in fact, it got to the point, I'm looking at my note cards. It got to the point where I would walk in and the first 3 rounds that I was ordering for myself, I'd order 2 beers because the bartenders would never get back to me quick enough. So I had to have 2 the first 3 rounds, and then I could kind of settle down enough to just have, 1 every time they got back. And then something happened. It might be uncomfortable for people to hear. I'll try to clean it up as much as I can, but I met a waitress one day. She was pretty much brand new, and we were talking. She'd been there a week or 2, and I said, hey, do you want to go to the Phoenix Giants preseason game tomorrow? And so, sure. So we had the day off. It was a Saturday or something. And we go to the game. We get there about 2 in the afternoon. We drank all afternoon. So, we're drinking until 6 or 7. We go, God, we ought to just go down to our bar and sit around and drink some more. So we drank all day. We drank all night. And it was one of the drunkest I ever got. And so we ended up at her apartment. And to try to be as clean as I can, we started messing around and kind of taking clothes off. And she said, I want all of you. And I said something like, for the first time in my life, I said, you might have to help me with that. And she jumped out of that bed and started screaming, I don't need this, get out, screaming at the top of her lungs, get the F out of here. And so it's kind of dark and I'm trying to find my clothes and her roommate comes running down the hall, kicks the door open, literally, they're screaming. I'm trying to get out of there. I'm out it's an apartment, I'm outside of the apartment trying to put clothes on. And I thought, oh, this is terrible. And she worked there. And so, because I couldn't perform. Who knows if I could? I didn't get the chance. But that started it. And from then on, it was like, okay, I can't have so many drinks that'll ever happen. So 5 to 8, right? So I have to have 5 to get the bravery to talk. After 8 or 9, now it might happen. And it started to be paranoia. And I started suffering from what's called performance anxiety. If any of you ever have had that, and you're new especially, it goes away after a while, but it's serious for a guy. And that's when I started getting paranoid. And this is when the crazy kind of started happening. And I started getting lonelier because I wanted to date, I was single. I was the DJ at the biggest nightclubs in Phoenix. A funny story about that, that was about 3 years before I got sober. About 2 years before I got sober, my friend Lori, she's just cute as a button. I adored her, but we were just friends. It was my birthday, and the bartenders got me really drunk, which is great. And she went to the Rod Stewart concert, and she came in just to see how her buddy Jay was doing at about midnight on his birthday. And I'm sitting at the bar. This is at Boots in the Colonnade Mall. Had a line of about 200 people, most popular bar in Phoenix at the time. And she comes and sits down next to me and she goes, how you doing? I go, good. And she goes, you don't look very good. I said, I'm good. She goes, let's go outside. You don't look good. So we walked, 200 people in line outside the front door. We walked down the front door, across the sidewalk, quit laughing, made it to the curb, and I let it all go. I upchucked right in front of the whole 200 people, and this cute as a button young lady turns to the crowd and she goes, don't worry, it's just the DJ. Don't tell him that. Here's another example of how you might have a problem when you're working in the bar business. toward the end of my drinking, you could get a shifter after work, okay? Not like anybody in the bar business ever illegally drank after work. And so I was the DJ, so the waitresses had to count their banks, the bartenders had to clean their stations, doorman had to get people out and make, I didn't. So I was the designated drink pourer, okay? But this was Malarkey's, biggest nightclub in Arizona. 24 stations, 37 waitresses on a busy night, 24 bartenders, 8 doormen. And so I needed my drinks. And this didn't occur to me. I didn't know I had a problem because you're working in a club that turns over 2,000 or 3,000 people a night. You can find a few that have a problem. If I ever get that bad, that's a problem, okay? And so I would pour the drink for me, put the glass under it, fill it up, and then put another glass under there, pull it, and drink that beer. And then that one was full. I'd put mine back under, turn around and give that beer to the waitress. And then mine's filling up maybe halfway, so I put theirs under there, drink the half, hand that out. And when I turned around to the waitresses, there's like 14 waitresses sitting along the bar, and I turn around and what I see is, and I'm like, what? Haven't you seen a real person drink? This is there was all these signs that I had the problem, and I couldn't see it. So anyway, that was how that went. Where am I at here? Anybody keeping track? So then I got a DUI. Oh joy. How that went, another funny story. Haha. So I pull out of Colonnade Mall after drinking one night. It was my night off. And I pull out Colonnade Mall, Camelback and 16th Street. The only thing open at 1:30 in the morning is our bar. Well, it's closed, but I mean, so I pull out, well lit. I pull onto Camelback Road, and a cop immediately hits the lights and pulls me over. He goes, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I said, "Yeah, I didn't have my headlights on because I pulled up." He goes, "That's correct." He goes, "Have you been drinking?" Well, for a second, I thought to myself, maybe you should, and I thought, no, of course, he knows. I said, like 12 or 15. He goes, "How many?" I went, 12. Take the lower number, right? So he goes, "Well, I'm going to have to give you the field sobriety test." And I said, "Okay." I enjoyed the cops. They came and threw people like you out of my bar. So we did the heel to toes, touch your nose, a couple others. The only one I couldn't do was I couldn't count backwards by threes from 1,000. I kept saying 997, 994, 991, 898. And then 988. And he did it twice, and and then my pupils were strangely dilated, go figure. And so he goes, "You kind of passed, but I got to take you down and give you the breathalyzer." I'm like, I didn't know what that meant, but okay. I'm cooperative with the police. I don't have a problem with the police myself. I can imagine other people do, but I don't. We go down to the station. There's 2 other officers while he's setting up the machine. There's 2 other officers talking behind me, and they found out where I worked. They kind of knew who I was. We're talking. And he goes, one of the officers behind me kind of goes to the other one. He goes, "What do you think?" And he goes, "I'm thinking like 0.08. And the other one goes, "I don't know." And back then it was 0.1. He goes, "I'm thinking 0.11. I didn't know what that meant. But they put me on the first machine, and it says 0.26. And they go, "Okay, somebody's been screwing with the machine. Put him on the other one." On the other one, I was 0.26. So they said, seriously, "Okay, somebody's been screwing with the calibrations. You can recalibrate them just like a scale to 0. So they recalibrate it, because clearly I'm not 0.26 to people that deal with alcoholics every single night. And I was 0.26. And one of the things I've learned from that in AA, this is my experience, you do not have to agree with it, is my kind of definition when I meet somebody that wants to know how do you know if you have a problem, I tell them it's not so much the amount. For me, what it is if when you drink you have a problem or problems and you don't want to have the problems and you can't quit drinking, do the math. That's because people, they find out I'm 38 years sober. my husband drinks 2 drinks every night. He's an alcoholic. I'm like, no. I mean, to me, you know, does he? If he has problems, well, then he has problems. But hell, everybody in Italy would be an alcoholic if 2 drinks a night was because they drink wine with their meals. Seriously, you know, I'm not trying to be funny. It's just, it's not the amount. It's what happens. I had a friend who was a DJ with me, and she would have 3 drinks, pass out on the floor, wake up with some guy she didn't know, and have to go home and explain to her husband why she was getting home at 6 in the morning with no panties. Now, 3 drinks. If you're a non-alcoholic, you go, I cannot ever do that again. 2 weeks later, 3 drinks on the floor, different guy, no panties. 2 weeks later, 3 drinks on the floor, different guy, no. That's a problem, only 3 drinks. I probably drove drunk, if 0.1's the legal limit, at least 1,000 times. I'm not proud of that, but it affects different people differently. It's not just some black and white thing, to me, that makes you an alcoholic. I just wanted to get that off my chest. Thanks for listening. So with the DUI, so I thought, okay, I had a securities license at the time. My other part-time job was mutual funds and stuff like that. And if you got a felony, which is the second DUI back then, you lost your license automatically for at least 5 years. And I went, okay, I don't want to lose that license. So I got to quit drinking. So I quit for 4 weeks. And then I threw a party at my house. Of course, I wasn't going to drink. And I drank. And so I thought, you can't do this, you know? So 2 more weeks I didn't drink. Longest I'd ever gone in my life. And the state of Arizona did my evaluation meeting, and they gave me this card that said for my body weight, I could have 5 in 3 hours and not be over the legal limit. Cool. So I can drink, I just have to control it. And so for the first week or 2, I had 4 or 5, and then alcoholism took in. And it's like, well, you know, Jay, the problem was you told them you had 12. So you could have 6 or 7, and if they pull you out of the car, just say, yes, officer, I've been drinking, but I only had 4, and this card says I can have 5. If you wanted me to take the field sobriety test, I know I can do the, you know, and it started. So then 3-4 weeks go by, 8, 10, 3 more weeks, alcoholism kicked in. There's a guy named Clint in Flagstaff. One of his favorite things to say was, alcohol kills the care cells. And this is, by now, it's the anxiety, the paranoia that I was telling you about, absolute loneliness. I was becoming suicidal. I actually drove out. I lived in Ahwatukee, and one night I got in my car and I decided to drive toward one of the abutments, one of the bridges, and kill myself. And I chickened out, which just made me that much more angry with myself because I was weak. Strange effect happens, by the way, with the light on here, and please don't turn it off. But you guys keep getting darker and darker, and I'm just wondering if it's me. So I got really paranoid and really lonely, and alcohol killed the care cells. And I finally got to the point where I said, I don't care. I just want to drink. Drinking's the only thing that makes me happy. Drinking's the only thing that's fun. And I just want to drink. And I don't care if I get 10 DUIs. I just don't care anymore. And it was about 6 months before I got sober, I went through that whole period. And every once in a while I'd meet somebody, usually at work, that I worked with that I was interested in. And back then, the only other thing that I thought I could finally find that person who I could date, and that would be my escape because I wouldn't be lonely anymore. God bless them. But, you know, it would just be, please save me. Please save me. I would never say that to him, but that's what I felt. And there was 2 waitresses at the club who I was always kidding around with and everything, and I loved them both. They were just fun. And I found out one of them happened to be sleeping with a barback, and in a relationship, in the bar business, if you wake up together, that's a relationship. So I immediately chose the other one, and 3 or 4 nights later, I kept trying to work up the courage, and it was like 4 or 5 nights later, and I thought, okay, tonight's the night. I'm going to ask Wendy the big question, which is, do you want to go out, just you and me, and get something to eat after work? And she was cleaning up her station, And this same bar back walks up and he's got his elbow on the bar and he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "No, I'm talking to Wendy." He goes, "Yeah, she's kind of cute, huh?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, we're married with 2.3 kids." And he goes, "Yeah, I'll clean it up. I've been sleeping with her the last 3 nights." And I was alone. That was the last chance I had for something that was going to save me. And there was a guy named Bob that was our head bartender. And Bob would say to me over and over and over, "Jay, I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous." He'd been sober about a year. "And if you ever know anybody that's got a problem with drinking, or if you just want to talk, send these people to me, because I'm in AA and working with other people is how I stay sober." And it got to the point where I'd say, "Bob, you've told me this like 40 times. And if I ever find that person, you know." And I was ready to go to the general manager, who was a close friend of his, and say, he's our head bartender and he's telling me this. Can you imagine what he's telling customers? This is a bar. And he's trying to get them all, you know. Didn't occur to me he wasn't telling it to everybody else. So I walked across the bar and I said, "Bob, give me a Michelob." And he brought it and I said, "This is the last drink I'm ever going to have. I think I need to go to one of those meetings." And honest to God, it was like, who the heck said that? And he looked at me and said, "Seriously?" I said, "Yeah." Oh, and by the way, if I could have been a card-carrying atheist at the time, I'd have had a card. I was an atheist. I believed there was no God. And he said, "Well, it's Thursday night. Do you think you can stay sober till Sunday?" And I said, usually staying sober for a day wasn't my problem. It was staying sober for a while. One day, get really sick, stay sober, you know, or something. I could do it for a day. He said, "Yeah, okay." He goes, "Okay, well, we'll go to the meeting Sunday night, right?" So it was a speaker meeting, and I told you the first speaker meeting I went to, I went, "Oh my God, I'm an alcoholic." I had hope. And this is how shy I still was. He said, "Hey, meet me here. I'm going to try and get to the noon meeting tomorrow." So it was a speaker meeting. Well, I thought every meeting in AA was a speaker meeting. So I go to the noon meeting at the Valley Alano Club, and they pick a topic and break up into groups and say, "Okay, now we're going to talk about the topic." I didn't know what to say about the topic, so I thought, I think I need to check my card, and luckily my card needed to go home. But they gave me a big book at the first meeting, and I'm a rabid reader, and I read that big book cover to cover in the first 30 days. Now, it was like reading a page in a hurricane and then ripping it out, but I read it, and as I read, I identified stories, everything. And so, and I talked to Bob, and I didn't tell him I wasn't going to meetings. I'd go to the speaker meeting every Sunday night. And after about a month, or 6 weeks, he said, "Hey, I'm going to go to that noon meeting tomorrow. Do you want to go?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure, I'll meet you there." So he does show. They break up into groups. There's a newcomer group. He said, "Let's go to the newcomer group." And I'm just like fidgeting all over. And he goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "Well, I don't know what to say." He goes, "Well, you can just pass." I didn't know you could pass. So if you're a newcomer, I almost didn't go to AA because nobody told me you could pass. Another of my pet peeves was early in sobriety, they'd say, "Look, there's nothing wrong with hanging out with people with short-term sobriety. You're new, that you can all relate. But look for the winners too." And by winners, we only mean people that have been sober a long time, because they have a lot of wisdom. They can help you. And so one of my pet peeves is people, and please, if you don't like this, just come up and yell at me afterward. But people that say, "I've been sober a few days," meaning I've been sober 20 years. I'm going to beg you not to ever do that again, because there was a guy who said regularly, "I've been sober a few days," and he got a 6-year chip. And I turned to everybody around me, I said, "He's lying. He's only been sober a few days." I'm serious about this. Please stop the AA code. No more code words. Newcomers don't get it. And I know we're trying to be humble when we say something like that, but think this through. When you kind of grin at all your friends and go, "I've been sober a few days," because they know what I mean, That's really not humble. It's you kind of trying to be cool with them. That's not humble. If you have a problem with that, think about saying, well, I've been sober through the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and what little efforts I could put into it for 6 years, and I can never, ever, ever pay AA back. Say that. That's my thing. Ruth W. So sponsors. So real quick, I know we started a little later, so I've got some time. Went through the first few months, atheist, got stuck in the first step, go figure. And people would come to me and finally and kind of said, Jay, when we say God, we notice you put your head down. I'm like, yeah, I don't like that God stuff. And they go, well, look, how about if you just think about the group? The group is a power greater than yourself, right? I'm like, well, yeah, collectively, they're probably smarter than me. Because, man, I was almost too smart to get this. And they said, well, when we say group, think group of drunks. It's a power greater than you. The initials are GOD. So if you're having a problem with God and you're new, just think about the group. It's a power greater than yourself, and then you can move on. And so I got a sponsor who appointed himself my sponsor because he was 23 years sober, he didn't have a car, and I did. And so I'm like, oh God, this is now I've got status, right? My sponsor's 23 years sober, okay. And so he was also a former Jesuit student, and he said, I want you to read Chapter the Agnostic every day for 2 weeks, twice a day. And I was about 10 days into that, and I read the line in italics that says, who am I to say there is no God? And I went, huh. And it was like, it was like a chill went right down my back. It wasn't a burning bush, but it was just a chill. And I went, I allowed myself to be open-minded enough to accept the idea that there could be some true power. And my first thought was, hope you're not pissed. And that was part of the journey. So I'm telling you all this if you're new, so that you can, if you're struggling with any of this. I still wasn't working steps. My experience is, a lot of people, say meeting makers make it, and I agree with that completely, but I don't think you can stay sober happily without working the steps, and I wasn't working the steps, and I got suicidal again. And people did a kind of an intervention on me and said, we're really worried about you. You need to get a sponsor. I said, well, I've got one. And I was walking through the Alano Club in Scottsdale dressed like this because I had a professional job, and Kathy A., don't know if she's even around anymore, saw me and she goes, you look nice today. I said, thanks. It was next in line in my closet. And she goes, who's your sponsor? I said, I can't remember his name now, but Fritz. And she goes, Fritz who's been gone for like 4 months? I said, yeah. When did you talk to him last? 4 months ago. She goes, well, when I say you look nice today, say thank you and get a new sponsor. And I'm busted. So there was a guy named, maybe Wayne, I can't remember, but I always thought of him as John Wayne because he'd stand like this when he talked at the Alano Club. And I thought, okay, that's going to be my sponsor. And I bought all the good stuff. I bought the Hazelden and all the different, because I wanted the real sobriety. And so I wrote out my fourth step, pages and pages and pages and pages. And I said, hey, can you help me with my fifth step? He goes, sure. And I didn't tell him he was my new sponsor. I kind of forgot to mention that. And he said, meet me tomorrow. So we're going through it, and it's just BS. And he said, Jay, look, you got a good start on this, but I'd go to the big book and just do it the way it is in there because it's simpler, and it is. And he said, and my sponsor was Chuck Chamberlain, and he said, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear, and he got up and walked away. I'm like, dude, I'm reading you my fifth step right now. How can you? I forgot to tell him that. And so, amazingly, I had bought the book New Pair of Glasses by Chuck Chamberlain about 2 weeks before, and the night before I had read Chuck Chamberlain saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. That's spirituality. If you have a problem with spirituality, start watching for stuff. Ruth used to say, you find God in the seeking. It's not seek and then you find and then you're done. Those of you that remember Ruth. Black Wally used to say, all I know is once I started believing there was a God, my life got a lot better. I don't know if there's a God, but once I started believing him, it got a lot better, so I think I'll keep believing. Black Wally used to say, I'd rather believe that I'm an alcoholic, even if I'm not, instead of being drunk, even just a little bit drunk. That's how he used to say it. So I want to believe there's a God. I want to believe I'm an alcoholic, and I do. Believe me, there's no question in my mind. So God consciousness. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. That's the theme of this roundup. I liked classic rock. So I was 3 years sober. So anyway, I'm sorry. So he walked away, and so I went and looked at the big book, and I started writing it all out that way. And the day I got it finished on a Saturday, I went to a dance, and a guy named Walt, who used to be a taper, he taped this conference a lot, was talking to me. He goes, do you have a sponsor? I said, no. He goes, you want me to be your sponsor? I'm like, sure. It's all the criteria I need, And he was great. He was a big book thumper. And he said, well, where are you at? I said, well, I just finished writing my 4th step today. He goes, okay. It was Saturday night. He goes, meet me tomorrow at 2. We'll do your 5th step, 6th step, and 7th step. Okay. And we did. That's how the book suggests you do it. You do the 5th step, and then you take the book down and wait and make sure you've done a good job, and you take the 6th and 7th step. And he said, now you need to start on your 8th step, which is it's made a list of people. You need to make a list of people you need to make amends to. And I suggest you put your dad first. And he also said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, nothing. Maybe this guy who's really cool and my new sponsor wants to hang out with me because I'm really cool. And he said, well, I'm going to be at central office tomorrow. I got to talk to a lady named Ruth. Why don't you meet me there? And I said, okay, we can go out and party or whatever. And so I met him there, and he said, Jay, this is Ruth. She's the central office manager, and she needs a volunteer from 1 to 5, and you're it. And I was a year sober. That's how long it took me to get to my 5th step, by the way. So please don't do that to yourself. So I started volunteering at central office. I started, Lindy from Mid-City, by the way. If anybody remembers Lindy, younger person. I'm still in contact with her. Fabulous, just wonderful person. By the way, it's so dark now I can't see any of you. So if I'm not making eye contact, don't take it personal. Lindy at one point was real involved in ICIPA, which is the International Conference of Young People in AA. And every year it's at a different city and you put in bids. And she goes, I was like 31. And she goes, Jay, and that was young back then. She goes, Jay, we need help because we're going to put in a bid for ICIPA. I told her I was good at databases or something. She goes, oh God, we need you so bad. Could you please come help us? Well, now, if somebody needed my help, I was always eager to help. And so I went to the meetings, and you know what? They never asked me about a frickin' database. It was her way of getting me involved in ICIPA, and I started hanging out with young people. And my God, the young people are just phenomenal. God, they're good. I love young people. And I started to get a God consciousness. And I was working at central office. It was about 3 years sober. Ruth was retiring for the 6th time. Every time I went south, they'd go get Ruth, come back. She was the first lady to get sober in Arizona. Stay sober in Arizona. She got sober in Chicago. Good friend of mine from Mid-City. And we got a new central office manager. And I swear to God, I had to also edit the newsletter for central office. I was the halftime bookkeeper. I couldn't put the dot over the I correct for this guy, okay? The cross on the T was too long. It was just pick. And I had 2 other jobs. I didn't need this job, and I put up with it for about a week or 2. And I said, okay, I gotta quit. But I knew my sponsor and I had talked about my whole life. When something went south, it's like, I'm gone. I can find something else, and I did. But I knew I shouldn't quit. I should try to stick it out. And so I went to Mid-City, sitting in the 5:30 meeting, and the Clash had a song, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And I'm sitting there for a half hour. It's my first real prayer. A half hour I'm sitting there going, should I stay or should I give my notice? And a half hour, and I went, I don't know. For the first time in my life, I'm always the decision maker. And I went, I don't know what I should do. And I said, God, you know what? Please make it perfectly clear to me if I'm being useful by staying at central office. And I hadn't listened for a half hour, and I started listening, and there was some lady in Mid-City was about 60, 70 people back then at a 5:30 meeting. And some lady in the back of the room had been talking for a minute or so, and I started listening, and within 60 seconds of me saying that, she said, all I know is if it wasn't for some guy named Jay at central office, I probably wouldn't be alive today. I'm like, okay, that's pretty clear. But be careful what you pray for. Be very explicit. I am reminded of sitting in a 5:30 Monday meeting here in Flagstaff, and a friend of mine was 5 years sober, and he came in and he said, be extremely careful about what you pray for, because Saturday night, I'm 4 years sober, whatever it was. And I was sitting there, and it was Saturday night. I'm alone. I've been working really hard for 4 years. I think I'm doing pretty darn good. And I said, God, you know what? If you can see your way, I really think I'm ready for a relationship. If you think it's okay, if you could put a woman in my life, I'd appreciate it. He said a half hour later, my daughter called, said she's pregnant and she's moving home. So I had to go make amends to my dad, just going backwards a little bit. And I hated my dad. And my dad pretty much hated me, and we didn't talk. If I called the house to talk to my mom and I said, is Mom there? He'd put the phone down. I didn't know if Mom was coming to the phone. There was no words. And I had to go make amends, and Walt said, you need to take God with you. We talked about how the amends were going to probably go. It didn't matter if he accepted them or not. This is about me trying to make my side of the street clean for anything I'd done wrong and be helpful to the other person. It's not about sorry. It's about if I did something wrong, what can I do to make it good for you? And I had to kind of make an appointment to see my dad, and we met. And I sat down, and I was 10 minutes into, I didn't do this, and we hadn't really talked for maybe 6-8 years, and he stops me, and he goes, but I always loved you. It's like, just went away, and we became friends. So the amends step, it could have gone the other way. He could have said, get the hell out of here, I don't want to talk to you. But I'm just telling you how important it is to clean up that you can walk down the street and it's self-esteem. It's not my car esteem, my house esteem, my jokes esteem. It's self-esteem because you're making an effort to make it good. If I took $10,000 from you, it's not, I'm really sorry I took that. Good luck. It's $10,000 back and interest. And is that enough? Because then you're clean. And I didn't come here to do hard time. I want to be clean and helpful. And I found that, am I going way too long, JR? I got a few minutes. Okay, few minutes. Okay, you don't know. Who knows? Say, hey, we ought never be organized, right? God knows we generally aren't. So where's number 4 here? Who knows? Anyway, so the steps real quick. I'll blow through that, tell you one story, and hopefully I'll get out of here. First step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, our lives becoming unmanageable. For me, the unmanageable part was the tough part because most of my life was manageable. And, the drinking wasn't, and there was other stuff like being suicidal, it's a little unmanageable. And Walt would say, Jay, this is the thing, it's an absolute. It's not whether it's mostly manageable. It's like jumping out of a plane with a parachute and you never pull the cord. It's manageable all the way to the ground. But if some part is not manageable, then it's unmanageable. I'm like, okay, I get it. It's so important to have a sponsor. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The thing I thought about in that step was the word came. You come to believe. It's not, okay, I need to believe. It's a process. For me, it took almost, 6-8 months. You heard me talk about the atheist part and all that. So understand that it's a journey that you come to believe. Just try to get there, because it's important. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. I've heard so many people, and if this worked for you, whatever makes you happy, keep doing it. But, if I turn my will and life over every day, I'm okay. The book says something to the effect of, we thought well before taking this vital and crucial step, making sure we were ready. And right after that it says, this step will have little permanent effect unless we take an effort to face and be rid of that which is blocking us. So that sounds like it's pretty well permanent. The 3rd step's permanent. And my sponsor said that's why we have an 11th step, is so that you continue to try to grow your spirituality. So for me, it's important for me to understand, and here's the reason. My sponsor said, Jay, if you keep thinking you're taking it back, then we need to go backwards and talk about what your higher power is, because it's not enough. Because you're not the higher power, and if you think you're taking it back, you're forgetting about God. And that's why the 11th step says continue to seek. Does that make sense? Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So in the 10th step it says, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. So when you're talking about what the character defects are, those, if you have to continue to in the 10th step, you must have started to in the 4th step. And what I tell newcomers sometimes if I'm sponsoring them or they're having trouble, God, what I did is the very first person was my dad. I could have written this whole book on my dad. And then I get mad, I don't want to do it anymore. I'll pick it up in a week or 2. If you're having trouble getting the 4th step done, try this with your sponsor's permission. Write down all the names. The judge, the parole officer, the IRS, my wife, my ex, my girlfriend, and my wife, whatever your situation is. Just write the names down. And then go to your sponsor, and first, it's the IRS. I owe them a lot of money. You can go right across that column now and just ask yourself, okay, Jay, you owe them a lot of money. Is that selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, or fear? It's fear. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to find out, in my experience, that's all I've got, it's always fear. You can say it's selfishness. Okay, that's because I'm afraid I'm not going to get enough. You can say it's dishonesty. That's because I'm afraid to tell the truth is going to be worse than lying. You can say it's resentment. This guy said this about me. I'm afraid people are going to believe him. I'm afraid he's going to keep saying it. It's the most freeing thing in your life to understand what the fear is. Talk to your sponsor about how you can walk through the fear. Admit God to ourselves and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Make sure you do it with another human being. My experience is it doesn't have to be your sponsor, but that's a good place to start. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. What are defects of character? Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear. The 12 and 12 talks about it being pride, or the 7 deadly sins, which is pride, anger, greed, gluttony, envy, lust, and sloth. Those are your character defects. You have to be entirely ready, meaning if you still want to be angry, because I'm just an angry guy, and that's what I like. Okay, you're not quite entirely ready probably, and that's okay. But you need to be entirely ready. And humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings, which is the same thing as defects of character. So the way Walt explained it to me is, so you told me I'm just going to be anger-free and I'm just going to be Dalai Lama. No. A defect of character is if somebody jumps me as I'm walking to my car tonight with a baseball bat and robs me, a normal person would be angry. Okay? A normal person would be angry. We're humans. They'd be angry a week from now. If you're angry 10 years from now, that's a defect of character. We make mountains out of mouse turds, pole vaulting over them. Those are the defects of character. We focus on the fears and so to get right-sized is what we're trying to do with the defects of character. Made a list of all persons who've been harmed, become willing to make amends. You have to get willing to make amends to everybody. Don't hold back. No, I'm never going to make amends to him because he doesn't matter what he did. We're trying to clean our side of the street. Made direct amends. It's not about saying I'm sorry. That's a good place to start, but it's about making it right because then you're clean. I can't tell you how great it is to be clean inside. Continue to take personal inventory. My sponsorship chain was never do a 4-step every year because I'm supposed to be doing an inventory constantly, not just once a day, constantly. Why do I need to do a 4-step every year if I'm doing it constantly? Sought through prayer and meditation, my favorite step, to improve my conscious contact, constantly trying to just get a better spirituality. My turnaround time's a lot quicker now because of spirituality. It's like, this guy made me mad, I'm going to march off and tell him. And my turnaround time used to be I'd get almost to him before I started turning around. Now I go about 1 step and go, well, that'd be stupid. So my turnaround time's better. Spiritual awakening is a result of these steps. There's a promise in the 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. If you're having a problem with spirituality, do the steps. I used to go to AA because I'd go, can you just tell me, look guys, it's a cult, I know. I just want to know, the steps are great for you guys. I just want to know how to not drink, okay? Can you just tell me how to not drink? Work the steps. Okay, thanks. Can you tell me how to not drink? Work the steps. Okay, so that's how you don't drink. And the promise is, having had a spiritual awakening, it doesn't say if you've had, when you've had, it implies that you will have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So if you're having trouble with spirituality, work the steps. I'm going to tell you that what I learned is drinking did not make me feel better. I would have told you that 10 years into sobriety, and one day I finally realized, no, it didn't. It made me not feel, which was a big step up, but it wasn't feeling better. For me to feel better is a big step up from not feeling. Drinking made me numb. It didn't make me feel better. Helping others fill the empty spot, I needed to also learn to try to do the right thing and then leave the result. It's up to me to only do the work. The result is up to my higher power. Some of the worst things that happened to me turned out to be the best things that happened to me. My parents died, now I'm more useful to people when their parents die. I went through a divorce, I'm more useful to people when they're going through a divorce. The worst things that happen become your best tools, especially the fact that you drank, because you can tell them how you drank. Everybody tells an alcoholic, you need to quit, you're going to lose your wife, you're going to lose your job, how can you do this, why don't you quit after 2, blah, blah. And we sit down and we go, you know, I don't know how you are, but this is how I drank, and this is how I felt. And the newcomer goes, that's how I am. What did you do? We have the power to help alcoholics that nobody else has. It's a gift. I can never, ever pay AA back for what it's given me. I have nothing but love now. I was standing all alone. It'll take 5 minutes to get through this. Eagles. I was standing all alone against the world outside. You were searching for a place to hide. Lost and lonely, now you've given me the will to survive. When we're hungry, love will keep us alive. I'm going to tell you my Icky Paw story, and then I'm going to thank you for the honor and privilege of being able to talk to you. So I was living in Portland, 18 years sober, and I just moved there, and some guys, young people, I ended up sponsoring them, and they wanted me, because I'd been involved in young people. I love young people meetings, the energy and enthusiasm when they're healthy meetings. They said, hey, can you come to our meeting, because we like some old farts to be there too. So sure. So they go, you know, so I started going, they go, hey, I don't know if you've ever heard of Icky Paw, but we got the bid and for Portland for this year. Can you come to the meetings? I said, yeah, I have been real involved in Icky Paw. I understand it. Can you come and help us? I'm like, I don't know how I'll help. It's supposed to be young people, but yeah. So I go to the meetings, and you have to, for any position there, like the entertainment chair or the coffee chair, you have to stand and give what you've done in AA, and then the people send you out of the room, they talk about it, and blah, blah. So you can't get a position unless you stand. And one day I missed a meeting, and they said, hey, congratulations on your new position. And I'm like, yeah, ha, ha, ha. I don't have a new position because you have to stand. And they went, no. For the spiritual chairperson of Alcoholics of the Icky Paw meeting, it's appointed by all the other chairs that have already been elected, and we appointed you. So the atheist that walked into Alcoholics Anonymous 18 years before became the spiritual chairperson of the International Conference of Young People in Alcoholics Anonymous. If that's not a frickin' miracle, I don't know what it's not me. Thank you for applause. You're applauding for AA. If you applaud when I'm done, God bless you. But you're applauding for AA because that's what I am. I am what AA has made me. Right at the end of that conference, I had to move to Lewiston for a new job. I mean, the conference ended at noon. I was moving at 2. Get to Lewiston. I'm there 6 months, 4 months. It's about a 7-hour drive from Lewiston to Portland. That's how far away it is, Lewiston, Idaho. And the young people, it's horrible. I mean, the old timers are extremely well intentioned, but they're telling the young people, you know, I'm so glad you're here. You're probably going to drink again, but at least you'll know we're here when you're ready. Trust me, they're ready. Don't ever say that to them. I will find you. We had 3 young people in 6 weeks die. One stuck a gun in her mouth behind KFC. Another one hung himself. One died at a concert in Seattle at an overdose. And I said, okay, we have to do something. I said, I'm gonna do a speaker meeting and dance. I can find the sound system and DJ it, or find somebody that I can coach to DJ it. I'm gonna call Portland. I'm gonna talk to Liz, who was on the committee with me. So I call her and I say, look, this is what's going on. I told her what happened. I said, they're so disorganized. There's hardly any young people, and they're told all this stuff. And I need you to find me 2 speakers, a man and a woman. We're gonna have a big speaker meeting. They can do a half hour to 45 minutes each. Take a break, man, woman, man, whatever. But I need you to find me 2 good speakers, because I knew they were all over Portland. I'd worked with them all. She goes, okay. And she knew all this crap and how serious it was. So Liz calls back, excuse me. So Liz calls back 3 days later. She goes, okay, I got your 2 speakers, and there's 26 of us coming from Portland to Lewiston. Nice. That is young people in AA. I just cannot tell you how much I love that enthusiasm and energy. So icky, icky, icky. And I hope you all can find that kind of love and commitment and get into service in some way. My favorite, last thing real quick, my favorite service position was in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I've been archives, GSR 5 times, PI CPC 2 or 3. I was the PI chair for Phoenix for a little while. My favorite position, if you're looking for service positions, we started a speaker meeting in Flagstaff. I think it's still going on. 7 o'clock or 7:30 on Friday nights, and the meeting before would end a half hour before, and we'd get my sponsor, Frank, whose wife is still here tonight, was a pilot, and he was a member of the Pacific Group, and he'd fly over to the Pacific Group on Thursday and then bring one of the Pacific Group people back on Friday a lot of the time. So we had Clancy and other people coming to Flagstaff, and so it was packed. And the Alano Club at the time was an 80-person occupancy in the big room, and we had like 100 chairs. So the 6:30 meeting would end, and it was in a little circle of 20 chairs. They'd talk for 10 minutes before we could kick them out of there. The meeting's going to start at 7. I was the chairperson. We had to set up 105 chairs, and I mean, they had to be perfect to get them all in this 80-person room in 10 minutes. And we had a committee of like 5 people, and we'd go in there and set it all up. There's service positions if you want them. Your group will find you service positions, and if you don't have a group, get a group. And I can't thank you enough for the honor and privilege of being able to talk to you. Thank you very much.